So I'm now going to show you some template. This is just example. Let me just show you so that you can see how long it is. It's not just a lot of things is said here. Okay, so now you are now at this point, because I've given you guys the point on the PowerPoint presentation. This is where you now need to elaborate some of the things you're trying to say. Is a time to tell some certain kind of stories about biomedical scientists as a profession. It's very, very important, okay? So maybe working in the pathology laboratory has always been something that I am passionate about. This was why I chose to just give those stories, which is also known. So when you say medical laboratory science, which is in Nigeria, I think some people say medical laboratory technology, something like that. You can let them know that which is also known as biomedical science in the United Kingdom. I am a hardworking motivator. Just say some of these things. Understand that the clinical research biomedical science profession is dynamic, which explains why approach to work continues to revolve as seen in a constant change in practice of guidelines. You can, even at this guideline, I think for me, if I was to do this again, I'll say, for example, you can measure some guidelines of maybe anything. Is it HCPC or IBMS or maybe UCAS, or just give them a few examples. That way they know, okay, this guy is up to date of what is going on in pathology laboratory. You see it now. So I was mentioning the fact that therefore, I understand the importance of being updated in several areas, such as human disease, and you are giving more information and new technology. There has been a significant change worldwide regarding automation, and this has continued to impact. That means you are aware of what is happening in this profession. It's not just, these are the things they really want to see. Okay, now, because you are trying to tell a story, and you are being given a word count to do this thing, okay? So now, by the time you say that, you can say something like, there's a place I was mentioning something like the dynamics of this very profession, and then you can give example that, for example, a biomedical scientist is now saddled with more responsibility, which require them to function in organizational and managerial roles. Why the level of technology in the laboratory appears to have reduced the level of manual techniques, because that means you know that automation has reduced it. You can say it is interesting that this outcome puts the responsibility of investigating if the results generated from the analyzer are reliable and reproducible on the biomedical scientist. When you do something manually, you don't need to investigate because you did it manually. But if our automation analyzer is doing it, that is why you validate it. Validation means you judge the result, you think about the result before you release that result. That is validation of result. And that is what you are trying to explain here, meaning that you know what that means. And that is where, if you like, you can give example as the case may be. So I think you can say a lot. Also, biomedical scientists are expected to train members of staff, to be competent in application and use of this analyzer. Furthermore, biomedical scientists are required to have good communication. So, say a lot of things along this line. Now, what I want to highlight here is how things are in paragraphs. So you can see that first paragraph is just to give overview of a certain kind of information. Now, this one is where I want to now talk about the regulatory body. So you now talk about how you are registered with HCPC, whether you are multidisciplinary biomedical scientist. Now, this is where I'm going to make a certain change. If you apply for hematology, don't remove this multidiscipline. Do you understand me? Put, hematology or microbiology. That's why you might need to change it or have different types of what you are doing. Okay? Now, you can measure some of the laboratory information system that you've used to validate results. I have good analytical, practical, pathology laboratory experience and all of that. So mention a few things along that line. And I have worked in a reputable hospitals. Don't talk down on your hospital, even if it is just a clinic. Sell yourself, okay? Mention a lot of things. Say that you are using something that whatever thing you are doing there is, let the things you are saying replicate what we're doing in the UK. Don't be afraid. Your own duty is, after you've written those things, go and study, go and ask questions to defend them. Okay, so, and all of that. Okay, so you can see here, I was trying to make that I have been able to broaden my experience in different departments, pathology laboratory, such as, so you can mention this if all you have done is internship. then it's obviously you need to mention each of these departments. But if you have passed your internship, you have had some experiences, if I were you, when I get to this point, I will be specific. I'm not going to try to make it generic. Now, I've continued to develop both personally, so now critical thinking and all of that. So you are still telling the story about yourself, your good communication skill, and understanding of the importance of prioritizing workload while ensuring that the standard is maintained. I always put service users, such as the patient first, as part of prioritizing workload. You see, now you are saying these are the things they ask you. Okay, so you can mention all of that. Now, the next thing now is that I start talking, in addition to, remember I've mentioned about HCPC, UCAS, IBMS, and all of that. Now, I want to now talk about the relationship between the IOC laboratory and UCAS in terms of quality management system. These are what these things are. When we talk about quality management system, is a broad terminology, and that is where this international organization standardization comes in, and UCAS comes in, and so on and so forth. Now, after you've mentioned that, you continue. You cannot say, at my current place of work. You cannot mention where you do. I think this one, when I did it, I wrote it for someone who is in Philippines. Okay, you can mention at your current place of work. Okay, the things you've done and the analyzer you have used. This is where you can now link it to the analyzer you have used, okay, whether previously or in that current place of work. You can say both in my current place of work, you can say both in my current place of work and in my previous place of work I've used. You can mention all of this, and troubleshooting analyzer and the analyzer you have used, external quality control assessment. Now, when you say something like external quality control assessment, you can say, for example, you can mention, you can tell them a lot of things along this line. Now, what I want you to notice here is that this aspect of your supporting information is very, very important, if I must say that. In fact, if there is something you must miss, don't miss this side. Okay, so this is where I will say something like, I've used a number of clinical laboratory analyzer to run and validate sample results, for example. Then you mention each of this one and say what you have used it for. Rochas, LCL top and all of that for what? Routine and special coagulation profile. In fact, you can even say, for example, and give example of what you've used it for. Okay, then Beckman cutter and all of that, you've used it for this. You can mention each of the analyzer that you've used. Vitec 2 compact for bacteria and yeast identification. You can say all of that, okay? And when it comes to ABO grouping and all of that, indirect and direct, you now give them more information. These are the things that they want to see. Once you have mentioned the analyzers, what they are there for, what it can be used to be done, the things that you've known. For example, if you are coming in blood transfusion, they want to, you see where I mentioned antigram here, okay? So meaning what I try to show them here is that extended phenotype. That's what we call extended phenotype. Imagine a laboratory manager hearing you mentioning extended phenotype. If you know what that means, the person will be like, this person even know extended phenotyping. Extended phenotype basically means that there's a routine phenotype. So when we have done our investigation, it looks like we now need to do extended phenotype. Then you can do extended phenotype like FYA or MNS, or some of these antibodies that are not routine. The routine one are anti-C, anti-big C, small c, big E, small e, and K. These are routine. Anything outside these are extended phenotyping. So by the time you mention that, that will resonate with them. I hope this makes sense, to be honest. I hope this is making. This, by the way, just example. There are many analyzers on the internet that you can get. It doesn't have to be any of this. Mention a lot of things from the internet and pick them up and write it and make it very, very well. There are some things I'm going to tell you guys in the end, but I just want to finish up this thing. Now, I have a good understanding of management, and you are not talking about SOP, how SOP are being formulated or generated, you now mention all of that. I have a good understanding of the management and the use of consumable and reagent, because they also want to know that you know how to manage the stock. I carry out reagent verification and validation. I understand the process of developing and documenting standard operating procedure, reporting incidents. So you can say all of this. These are the questions they ask you guys when you go for interview. Okay. Now, finally, I checked this one. I really want to read it. I checked the job description and person specification of this role. Before applying for the position, I feel I have the essential skills, qualities, qualification, and experiences required for the position. Also, I check the trust value, which resonates with me. Very important. You are saying it's not just your job. There is something about your company that I like. These are the things you need to mention to them, which resonate with it as it reflects my personality. Or you can say it reflects my professional core values, as the case may be. That gives me confidence that this is the kind of place I would like. You are telling these guys that you have read about them, you love them, you, even if you've not started working with them, you like them. These are the things that compel them to shortlist you. I feel confident that I meet the required specification of this job. This is because, just to mention a few, I have a track record of passion, all of that. Just mention anything in line with what they've said and politely tell them, I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Kind regard, then put your name. Does that make sense, guys? Huh?
Yes, sir.
Good. So if we've done that, I'm going to try to also show you the working experience. If you look at this place, you're going to say, I like to group my own generally into different departments. You don't necessarily need to use this style, but you can have your creativity on how to do it. Even if you don't use this style, you can use a paragraph way of, showing that this is a different thing. But whichever way that is best for you creatively or critically thinking to show how best way to bring out your information, that is good. If you look at this general, it doesn't matter where you work, okay? This is the same. Now, what I would say that when I say I work as medical laboratory scientist okay, so if I were you, if you have had experience, you have worked in many places, and you apply for microbiology, say I work as a medical laboratory scientist or as a biomedical scientist in microbiology. Don't mention all of them. I've said this over and over. If you've had many experiences, put general in previous experiences. Okay. In fact, if I were you, if you have had five, if you have worked in 5 places, use the last 3 to show your specificity on that area of that profession you want to apply that job. So use your last 3 as maybe I work in microbiology, both in the last 3, like 3, 4, and the current one, which is the 5th one. So do it like that. Okay. So this place will show you the general, information about the laboratory, and this can be a laboratory. This is just to mention a few. Now, when it comes to hematology laboratory, you can see I mentioned the analyzer, I mentioned what I use them for, I say a lot of things. Let me give you an example. Imagine something like saying I use a various hematology analyzer, example, 6 months, whatever, and I mentioned all of that. Say for what? For routine investigation of full blood count, or complete blood count, red cell indices, and other routine parameters in hematology like MCV. You mentioned this. People have gone for interview. They say, what are the parameters analyzed in full blood count? You are showing them here that you know it. So you also mentioned like an interpretation of blood film. I am competent in the use of. You now start saying other things you are competent. I can manually make and of course make and stem blood film. I understand the use and application of microscope for blood film morphology. Competent in the manual blood film reading where I can identify hematological malignancy. So you can say a lot of things along this line. It's just to make sure that you don't just say something and run off. Still continue to sell yourself and make sure it's okay. So look at the coagulation again. You can mention, the analyzer you've used, what you have used it to do, and give example. Talk about the mixing study where appropriate. Sell yourself. Say many of these things. Now again, if you come to blood transfusion, the same thing. Mention the analyzer you've used. Mention what they are used for. Go as far as you can. Now, another thing I want to highlight here, you can see here, I say I understand MHRA and BSH, guidelines in blood bank laboratory. These are the things they want to see. Okay, so mention a lot of things. There is something I say here. I'm competent in dealing with emergency protocol. By the time you say this thing, they understand. Okay, this guy understand what you are saying. In fact, if you even put it very well, you can say there is, because this protocol includes something like maybe pack 1, pack 2, pack 3, pack 4. You can mention all of this. These things are already on my previous video. If you listen to them, you can bring all those information as your work experiences. Don't be afraid. If you read it and listen to it on the YouTube channel, you can say it. Okay. Now, for biochemistry, of course, you can elaborate this more, but these just a few I was able to write because of time. I mentioned the analyzer and all of that, what they are used for and all of that. But again, I want you to see what I've done here. I understand the investigation of possible EDTA or sodium citrate contamination. These are the things that they want to see. I could have even elaborated this more. Maybe how it can affect the result. You understand the hemolysis. There are so many things you can say here. okay, which obviously I also have on my video in terms of how to validate high potassium, because I didn't highlight the possibility of this EDTA affecting the potassium result, or sodium citrate affecting the sodium level. So you can mention this and still elaborate what you actually mean by this information I've said here. I'm competent in the maintenance and calibration and troubleshooting of analyzer. You can mention some of that and even give example, okay, and all of that, okay. Now the same thing is applicable with microbiology. I just want to run now, okay. Mention few things that analyzer you've used and the things you've done, but each one of the experiences there is analyzer. That means you need to know how to do the maintenance, the calibration, interpret the quality control, and all of that, troubleshooting them and all of that, okay. Then of course this is the histo part as well, mentioning your experiences in tissue processing or whatever, staining, H&E staining. You can even mention special staining, troubleshooting, microtomy, okay. Just mention all of these things. They are very, very important. Then in the result validation, you cannot choose, am I doing first line validation or second line validation? So in most places, they just use validation. There's nothing like first line or second line validation. But in some places, they do first line validation and second line validation. So what I would say is that if you have more than one, if you have worked in many places, what you then need to do is to try to mention in some places that you've done second line validation and first line validation. That's two-way validation. Or at some places just say I validate result using this or that or that. If I say using laboratory information management system, that is not specific, then you can mention a lab center, Meditech, telepath, and all of that. Now if you say all of these things, I strongly believe that they will not have any option, they will not, than to shortlist you for interview. And this is just what I thought I should bring out to you people, because this is just the problem people have. Hopefully you've been able to make use of the information that has been given here. So if that is the case, I'm just going to say thank you very much for listening.